The quote to cash, I think, was a huge initiative for us to clean up, and also a huge efficiency and time saver once we got that process nailed down. And so getting all of your products aligned, it's getting how you sell them and what are the guardrails, what's the approvals, what requires, deal desk. And then seamlessly passing that over into the finance team. So they've got everything that they need to invoice and then bill, and automating the contract and the subscriptions and the renewals.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the RevAmp Podcast. I have a very special guest today who I'm really excited to chat with, all things, about scalability and RevOps and how to standardize processes and operations. So before we jump into everything, why don't you go ahead and, introduce yourself to the audience and let us know a little bit about, who you are, where you're from, what you do, how you got to where you're at.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me. It's always fun to talk RevOps. My name is Hannah Hanrahan, and I lead revenue operations at Atrius. We are a part of Acuity Brands, and I have 18 years in operations under my belt, although not all of it came from revenue operations. I think, like many people, I started in a different area, which was marketing, and got into marketing ops, got into demand gen, found my way into sales operations, and then realized that a lot of what I was doing was actually supporting what revenue operations traditionally does. So all the teams across the customer engagement journey. So that's what I've been up to. And, our team here, our focus is really on just streamlining customer journey and supporting what I like to call the backstage operations of people, process, and tools and technology.
I love that, backstage operations. So I think that encompasses things pretty well, and I think you have a kind of unique viewpoint that I think most people I've talked to come to revenue operations via sales and sales operations, coming from marketing, then into sales operations. It gives you a kind of broader view of the customer journey, which is a unique and probably beneficial. I guess before we jump into it, what does a customer journey look like from an operations perspective, and like what are the things that you're responsible for optimizing for?
Yeah, so I think the customer journey that I've leveraged, there's actually a really great template on Miro that I started with. And there's the top that I think is what everybody expects, the stage, the customer pains, how we're solving it. And then there's the bottom half, which I don't think we talk about as much. And that's more of the people responsible, the handoffs, the processes, the standard work, the KPIs, and how we're tracking across each of those things. So that's what I think about when I think of the customer journey. I think more of the bottom half. Some of those core processes are things like quote to cash, how that works from the sales rep getting in and creating quotes, how they place orders, how that pushes through to finance, what the invoice looks like, how do we recognize things. And that actually leads to another core process that we own, which is working with our product team on the go-to-market. So when we're launching a product, how do we bring that product to market in a way that the sales reps can easily quote it, and bring those pricing models to life in a way that's simple to execute. So working with them on operationalizing just products and pricing. Another piece is the SaaS contract and amendment and renewal process. Those, again, are all part of that same cycle. You've got your order, you quote it, you close it, it goes into a contract, and then you ultimately renew it. So setting up all of those things, but then also training and enabling the teams on how to use it, and maintaining it when it doesn't go right, because there's always something that pops up. Another piece is more, I think, just the traditional sales operations. So deal desk, sales methodology, sales process. I talked a little bit about training and enablement, and then supporting our execs on their KPIs and tracking those across all of the different functions.
Wow.
Those are, I think, the big ones.
That's a, you're
Just a
right.
few.
And a lot of pots. So many different threads to pull on there. One direction, I'd love to go and kind of understand is, you talked about adding new products for the sellers to work with. How often do you release, new products or update your SKUs where you have to kind of introduce something like that to the sellers and kind of train them and add, SKUs to the motion?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, I feel like it ebbs and flows. So there'll be periods of time where, we're reviewing, kind of restructuring, repackaging. In a year, I mean, probably 2, 3, 4, it sort of depends. And it's not, those could be a fully new product that we're launching. It could be an add-on to a product. It could be a pricing modification. It could, so there's a few different variations that it takes. It's not a constant every month type of thing, but I would say it comes in projects, and there's either a large project or a small project each quarter.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I only ask because, given how fast the pace of change seems to be increasing, and the dynamics of the market have been kind of wild. I've seen that impact the way pricing, for example, is done, and the challenges that it come with it. So it sounds, it's interesting. That tends to be a big challenge when I speak to folks. But taking a step back and talking a little bit about, kind of what I was hoping we jump into is a little bit about, how to think about revenue operations organizationally in a way that even if, the person at home listening or watching is, the director of RevOps for, a smaller startup, but, scalability is on their mind, right? You always, you work for today, but you got to build for what's going to be needed tomorrow. So when thinking about kind of building for scale, let's talk organizationally, like in terms of, the positions that would be involved. What is the thought process there? How do you have to think about it? And what are the steps you have to take? Obviously, early on, you may have limited resources and can only make, you have to choose what has the biggest impact.
Yeah.
For you deploy.
Yeah. So my team has always been somewhat lean, but I'm always prepared for what I need if and when that opportunity comes. So from the small standpoint, I like to, and this is a team of 3 right now, but I was a team of 1. And as a team of 1, I was probably what you'd call like a Swiss Army knife. You just kind of need to know and figure out all the things. And when you're smaller, you need those people that are just willing to dig in, figure out how it works, create a process around it, not be afraid to create a process, and just, kind of do what you can. When I moved into at least like 3, which is, still small and lean, I organized it in that we've got our tech side of the business. And so I've got a dedicated Salesforce admin. And then we do have a managed service company that they can help plug into some of the larger projects. So we're not just stuck trying to figure things out. They help us just move through. And then I have a sales ops lead. And those, I think, are the core pieces. And then as we move forward and are starting to grow and think about what it takes to scale, I I continue to organize it in that way, in that we've got more of this SF dev type of group who are managing the more technical projects. And then we've got these business operation leads. So that sales ops person would ultimately become a sales ops person and a CX support or business partner in operations, and then maybe support and products and finance, just depending on where you need to, where you've got the most work is probably how you prioritize it. And those people can then come to the tech group with their challenges and their issue or their business problems that they're working to, automate or, create more efficiency around. And they can support on what it takes to then go build that out. And then I think the other one that I'm finding is really important is a project manager, because a lot of these projects they're technical projects, and some people don't have that skill set of taking the business need and translating it into terms that somebody who's more of a developer can take and go execute. So that's how I like to organize it. The other piece, actually, there's two more pieces that are different functions, which is the analytics. So that's a whole thread, and sales enablement. And again, these pieces all work together. So you've got your business operation partners who are working very closely with the individual teams, uncovering what's working, what's not working, owning the processes, the handoffs, and then uncovering gaps or things that they need to go work on. And they can bring those to, the project manager, the Salesforce admin to go help execute. And then you've got, your enablement team who can then go train them on those systems and processes. And then the data side of just constantly, fulfilling all the requirements of tracking and reporting metrics and keeping the team leads aligned on that part. So that's the way we're building out. And I think the one other piece that I would say, especially with a small team, is standardizing processes as much as you can. So you're not wasting time on things like quote to cash happening in Excel and pricing happening in Excel, and then trying to shove it through and wondering why it doesn't add up. And, it's, if like, and on the Salesforce side, we used email to case and like the whole case object to create our own RevOps case queue. So that piece is also standardized too. So we're not just having people ping us constantly with everything that's wrong at a given moment. It gets into the queue when we start to triage it and work on it in a standard support flow.
Yeah, I love the the quotes in spreadsheets. Something here we hear a lot, and I think when you start doing it, it seems like it's manageable, and it very quickly gets unmanageable. You had mentioned, I love the idea of a Swiss Army knife. I've always tried to be one myself, or at least kind of try to be. Yeah. You had mentioned, looking for things that are happening and figuring how to standardize and operationalize them. So, what's your kind of decision framework for, let's say that you come into a company that, things are not operationalized yet. There's not a lot of standardization. How do you decide where to start first and what to look for in terms of priorities to get that kind of standardization done?
Yeah, I think it's evolved over time, but we've got off the ground a really great KPI framework that aligns to each of those customer journey stages.
Yeah.
And each of those stages has a different business owner. So getting that in place is important, because just figuring out how to track each of those metrics and understand if you're on target or not is what you need to understand to then use that data to drive where you focus. Because we're a SaaS business, and I think many SaaS businesses, ARR growth is something that you're looking to achieve, but that metric alone is it doesn't. You have to like unravel it to understand what parts are working and what's not. And so part of this metric, these KPIs that we have, it's in one spot. We can see what's working, what's not working, and that's how we tend to prioritize where we really need to focus. So if pipeline is really struggling, there might be many things that are not great, but if one of them is struggling, more than the others, then we can go focus in on that area and really support the team to figure out what is it that we need to do to increase, on the pipeline side, or what do we need to do to get the renewal rate up, that type of stuff.
Yeah, and so that gives you kind of a pretty high level visibility of all the different inputs that are happening that go towards the ultimate goal, which is, like you said, growing revenue. When you think about kind of the core processes that RevOps needs to standardize, kind of across the board. I know that every companies are different, but what are the kind of handful of core processes that are low hanging fruit? Those are the things that need to be taken care of. It can't be ad hoc.
Yeah, I mean, I think the sales process and alignment with marketing on what that marketing lead to sales looks like, as well as the stages within an opportunity and what does it mean to be in each stage, your forecast process, what's required of the sales team to keep up to date in terms of data hygiene, to make sure the forecast is accurate. So those are probably a little bit more traditional sales ops type of processes. And then the quote to cash, I think, was a huge initiative for us to clean up, and also a huge efficiency and time saver once we got that process nailed down. And so, that's getting all of your products aligned. It's getting how you sell them and what are the guardrails, what's the approvals, what requires, deal desk. And then seamlessly passing that over into the finance team. So they've got everything that they need to invoice and then bill, and automating the contract and the subscriptions and the renewals. Because when you don't automate those, or you step into a homegrown system, which is what I did, things will break. You just will, or you spend a lot of time figuring out, what was the contracts, what got added, how do we reconcile? So those, I think, are the top for me that have saved a lot of time as we've been able to tackle them.
Yeah. That's very true. And it's never fun when finance a couple months later starts asking about some contract that happened and it's in someone's email, or
and I guess the order forms part of that, right? So working with legal to get just the contracting, we have ours organized in a way that we try to stay out of redlining as much as possible. And again, that's another time saver. So all those pieces work together, and I guess you can kind of tackle them one by one.
Yeah. And you were mentioning Deal Desk. Is that a relatively new initiative? And what was your role, or RevOps' role, in kind of building that out?
Yeah, Deal Desk, we've had it for a while, and my role generally is facilitating all of the different people. So getting it off the ground, getting it started, making sure it's clear what the process is, how to contribute to Deal Desk, all the right people are in the room, that kind of thing. And then managing the process of the approvals. So, because our Deal Desk is actually triggered by a certain threshold. And so when it hits that threshold, then it's like getting that group together. So it's facilitating is really at the heart of it.
Yeah, I mean, that was going to be my next question is, did you standardize kind of the rules about when something gets escalated to deal desk?
Yeah.
It sounds like you have a pretty specific variable, whatever it is that triggers that.
Yeah. And it's even facilitating that conversation to nail down what it is, because you'll have different voices and different opinions. And so it's just gathering those people that are involved in the decision to align and agree on what those approvals are. Um, put the process in place to track the approvals, and then put the process in place to get the actual deal desk together.
So one of the interesting juxtapositions is, we're talking a lot about customer journey as if the actual customer, but in the world of RevOps, kind of you have internal customers that you're building for, quote unquote, whether it's a process or a tool.
Yeah.
How do you ensure that when you're standardizing and building these things, that your internal customer, whether it's the seller or whomever, that it's optimized for them, that their customer journey is, thought about. I know that there can be a kind of top-down phenomenon where, someone can say, well, we'll just add this field there or that field there, but when, they're missing the friction that might add to a seller, when they're actually doing it. So how do you incorporate, the actual the usability from your, internal customer into those decisions?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a constant probably optimization and just feedback loop, but with sales process, for instance, that process we did gather everybody to get their opinion on what each stage should be, what it meant to be in that stage, and then really consolidated it down into, what's the input, what's the output, what are the key actions, and then again gathered them together to get buy-in on, after we heard all of what you guys said, here's what we think makes sense, and then do you have any final feedback before we roll it out? So when you're able to do that, I think it's good, especially in a process that really impacts sales, like the sales process or sales methodology. When it comes to, product packaging and pricing, sometimes those might be a little bit harder. I think there's more of a natural conversation between like sales lead and the product teams. And then we will get feedback occasionally on, we rolled this out and it's a little bit tricky, or can we tweak this? I'm always open for people to provide that kind of feedback. So I think it kind of depends on the project that you're working on and the level of feedback you can get into it, but keeping the door open to letting them go test and try it, and then modifying as you go. It's, it's kind of like software. You're just constantly iterating and tweaking. So that's how we.
I'm interested to know, like software, often software will have a beta and beta testers.
Mhm.
Is there an equivalent that ends up happening where you may pick someone from a given team and
Yeah.
have them kind of test things out to see how it feels to them?
Yeah, that's another approach we've taken. So especially with tools. So rolling a new tool out. We've had a team or two members go and test it and really be the power users and let us know how it's working before we decide to then go roll it out to the whole group. Yeah, I think that's another approach to take as well.
Yeah. Yes. I love being that guinea pig internally, because I'm a big fan of testing out, trying new tools and fun stuff.
Yeah.
So, we're kind of in a place where we had COVID, and everyone, the entire what it means to be an employee working for a company, they completely upended. We all went work from home. A lot of people had never done that before. Then we had kind of the easy money and especially in tech in particular, A lot of companies did very well off that, and now we've kind of had a swing back in the other direction. There was this mindset for a long time where it was growth at all costs. Any tool you need, you get. It doesn't matter how much it costs to acquire customers, as long as you're acquiring it. The sentiment has clearly changed, I think, to efficient growth, let's say. Has that presented a change in, or required a kind of a change in your thinking and from a RevOps perspective, or how you approach things? Has there been kind of more consolidation internally of tools and kind of cutting the fat, so to speak? And
Yeah.
what impact has that had on the RevOps team?
Yeah, it's funny. In my scenario, we've actually been very lean on tools. So I think I've come at this one from the opposite of what most of the like SaaS and startup world sees, where we were pretty lean already. So we're actually looking at what are tools that we need to add. But there have been times, and I think when I first stepped into this role, we did have more tools, but they weren't all being used efficiently, and they weren't syncing well, and they were constantly causing questions and why this number is that. So we cut more at that time. And then now we're actually in a space where we need to add a few things. But as we look at them, we're really evaluating, what makes sense, and how does it work well with the other tools in the tool stack. So I might have a different point of view on that than the general audience.
No, I think in a lot of ways you're lucky, because I think when you're kind of living in a world where there aren't constraints on resources for tooling, and then very quickly that band-aid gets pulled off, it becomes much harder than if you're kind of used to being able to do more with less.
Mhm.
When you do think about, yes, we have to increase the tooling here or there, how do you make the decision on, do we build build it ourselves? Do we look externally? Can what we're doing with one system, we can kind of jerry rig it to do the thing we want, but should we buy a bespoke tool specifically? How do you decide on like when it's needed?
Yeah, I mean, the build or buy for really good big core pieces like quoting, I mean, that's the one. But I moved from homegrown to a standard. I think if there's an entire industry out there that's, focused on building a product and constantly thinking about all the ins and outs of it every day, you probably should take a look and see what they're doing, because they're likely thinking things through that you haven't considered. And so homegrown, I'm not as much of a homegrown. I think like using the tools available to you to their maximum is something that we do try to do. So Salesforce can do a ton of different things. And if we can make it work, then we'll try to use the tool that's available to us. But if we have, team members, or we've done some industry research to understand the top tools in that space that are competitive, we'll go deeper to understand, okay, what can they do that we can't? And we're actually in one of those conversations now. And so then we'll start to evaluate, okay, well, what are like the best in class companies using? What's the industry standard? And look at bringing something like that in to help. So I think I like to go and talk to people and see what they're using. And, I like to look at industry analysts to understand what the recommended tools are and how they stack up against each other. But then I also encourage people to be innovative and look and see what they have right at their fingertips to be able to automate process. And, not overlook something that could do the job just as well. So I don't have like a very documented process, but that's my own internal kind of thinking on how I approach it.
Yeah. Man, there's so many things we could explore here, but we are running out of time. So before we wrap this up, is there somewhere folks at home can maybe learn more about you or the company, or they can maybe follow you on the socials, or see if you're going to be at any events upcoming?
Sure. So I am on LinkedIn, and Atrius.com is where you can learn about my company and what we're up to. It's pretty interesting. We're in energy and sustainability and working with some very interesting sustainability and facility managers to centralize their energy data, normalize it, and put it into a format that they can then understand how to cut costs. So you can find me at atrius.com, LinkedIn, and then I also actually lead the RevOps co-ops chapter in Austin. So if you're in Austin, definitely let me know. We have some fun networking events, and they're similar to this. It's just people working through top challenges and trying to figure out, how others are approaching it, and what's working, what's not. So it's a good community of like-minded people.
Yes, and we love RevOps Co-op as well at DL Hub, and we'll be at the RevOps AF event in San Diego as a company, as a sponsor. I don't know if we'll see you there, but I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, it should be a good one.
Yeah. Well, and thank you so much for joining us today, and hopefully we'll get to see you soon.